Okay, I think let's kick this off. So welcome everyone. This is actually a great opportunity to have everyone here. And you'll see just now, this is a collaboration between various user groups and meetups. Yeah, I think it's the first time that we're doing something like this. But I'm sure you're in store for a great session and great insights from this as well. My name is Rishal. I'm one of the organizers of the BI user group, and we'll introduce the rest of our hosts and people on the panel shortly. As we've mentioned earlier, please go to Slido and Interact to ask questions on Slido and also engage on Interact. The QR codes are on screen. But there's also links that Stefan has posted for us in the chat if you need it. Okay. During the session, we just like to ask you to mute your audio just so that's not interrupted. And also use Slido to ask your questions. That could help. Also, enable your camera when speaking. We do want to make this interactive. So if you'd like to ask the panel a question directly, yeah, you can unmute yourself and also enable your camera just to make this more interactive. Secondly, as we've said, also we're using Slido for questions, or you can also use the raise hand option if you'd like to speak directly on Zoom. Then we've also mentioned that we can use Interacts to interact with the discussion. And also, as we've noted in the chat, this session is being recorded. So yeah, please let us know if there's any objections to that. We do plan to make this available on YouTube for everyone afterwards as well. Okay, and also, I think this is quite significant. This panel discussion that we are hosting here today is being done in collaboration with 5 different user groups or meetups. So firstly, you can see there on the left-hand side, it's the Data Science Johannesburg meetup group where Matthew Bernath on the panel, he's one of the organizers there. There's the Data Platform user group where Michael Johnson is an organizer. There's the Johannesburg Power BI user group where Sven is an organizer. Artificial Intelligence ZA, or also known as the AI Meetup, where Rishal Hurbans is an organizer, and the Johannesburg BI user group where myself and Stefan are organizers. And all of these events are on Meetup and Eventbrite, as well as the Microsoft Power BI community site. And I believe, I just want to check here, Stefan has just posted that. Yeah, he will be posting those links in the chat shortly to all those events if you'd like to join them for in the future. Okay, and thanks, Stefan. Okay, and next I'd like to introduce the panel host for today. So that's Rishal Hurbans. And he is the author of Grokking AI Algorithms. It's a book that was released, I think, a year or 2 ago. And he's also building at Prolific Idea and Viszen. And for his day job, he is a business solutions manager at Entelect, the company for which I work as well. Okay, so Rishal, over to you.
Thanks, Rian. Thanks for that intro. Yeah, I think when the guys were asking about hosting this, I thought it was a interesting and probably really fun idea. As Rian mentioned, I wrote a book that's I guess intended for developers and people getting started in data and algorithms. But since I've also been involved with discussions in many customers, my job is basically a glorified consultant. So I get a view of the kind of problems our customers in enterprise experience here in South Africa, as well as internationally. So I'm really looking forward to moderating this. And I think let's get to introducing our panel. All right, so first off, I think this is positioned as a kind of pitting data science against business intelligence. Let's see how that goes. But on team business intelligence, we have Michael Johnson. He's business intelligence architect, also Microsoft Data Platform MVP from Johannesburg. He's been working in data for, I couldn't tell, it's either 15 or 20 years. Either way, it's quite a long time. And he runs the local SQL Server user group as well as SQL Saturdays. And yeah, he loves showing people new tools and technologies that allow them to work a bit more efficiently with their data. Thanks for being here, Michael. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
You say 20 years, you make me sound so old, right? But unfortunately, it's the truth, right?
Awesome, cool, thanks. And then on the second member of Team Business Intelligence, we've got Sven Foss. He runs the Johannesburg Power BI user group. He's quite possibly the biggest Power BI fan in the world. And for his day job, he's the MD of Seidor Analytics. I hope I said that correctly, which specializes in business intelligence, consulting services, and training. Thanks for being here, Sven.
A great pleasure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And then on Team Data Science. Okay, so this is the opponents to Team Business Intelligence. We've got Ncumisa, Hlapo. Ncumisa is business intelligence lead and senior specialist. She's into data warehousing and business intelligence, and she's also the speaker and host of Data Talk sessions. Thanks for being here, Ncumisa.
Thank you, Rishal. This should be interesting for me as a BI lead, right? Sitting on the data science team.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and then our final member of Team Data Science, we have Matthew Bernath. He's the head of data analytics at Rand Merchant Bank. He hosts the Financial Modeling podcast and the RMB Data Analytics podcast. And he's also the co-founder of the Financial Modeling Summit. It sounds like you're kept really busy. Thanks for being here, Matt.
Thank you for having me. See, I was quite strategic in my choice of partner. I've already converted BI specialist to be on the data science side.
All right. I think let's get into it. I think the first thing we'd like to do is get some audience participation here to get this kicked off. So I'm going to share my screen. If you haven't joined this link, please join it. It will allow you to vote. Just trying to find where my Zoom things are. All right, so the first thing we want to do is, here's a question. Let's start this discussion. Do you think AI is just statistics in practice? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Oh, it's like 50-50. I see yes is slightly in the lead. So with that said, I'd like to hear a little bit from our panelists, right? We added this question. I think AI is a bit of an overused term, and people don't really understand what it really means. So I want to ask Team Business Intelligence, what do you view BI as, and how does that relate to this buzzword of artificial intelligence?
Michael, if I may just answer that quickly, partly because actually I've prepared a little screen share just to put a visual together. I mean, it's mostly text, but just to try and explain what business intelligence is, especially at the start of a discussion like this. You just need to know, what's the definition of certain things. So just bear with me 2 seconds. I'm going to just share my screen. And just if one of you can confirm if you can see that, it should be, let's just get rid of the chat windows there. Okay, can you just see it? I mean, it's an Evernote clipping of a website. It happens to be the Power BI website. I've also got the Tableau website, both of which have definitions of business intelligence. So without going through all the text, I've just highlighted certain pieces. I thought we'd just draw some of those out. So business intelligence, historical and current data. So that is an important component to it, and we'll talk about it quite a lot in terms of how that's different from data science. Important here, quickly uncovering actionable insights, all right? Making strategic decisions. Okay, in this case, I'm just skipping over it, otherwise it'll take too long. Large data sets, processing large data sets across multiple sources. Those who work with business intelligence are doing that all day, every day, but just to set the scene for everyone else. And then really important, you're trying to present the findings in a visually appealing and interactive way so that people can understand it. And then just a quick one, there's 4 key steps. You're collecting the data, you're transforming the data, that's step 1. Step 2, you're trying to uncover trends and inconsistencies. Step 3, you're visualizing your findings, and step 4 is all about taking action and so on. So that's the Power BI one. I'll just quickly do the Tableau one just to keep it balanced. And in this case, I'm going to skip the first part and just talk about the second part. I like this part. It says it is much more than a specific thing. So it's actually an umbrella term. Business intelligence means way more than just one thing like data analysis. It includes data mining, reporting, performance metrics and benchmarking, descriptive analytics, querying, statistical analysis, visualization, visual analysis, and data prep. So that's meant to just give some buzzwords out there in terms of what's associated with business intelligence. I'm going to stop the share now. In terms of artificial intelligence, I will mention that, sorry, I can't do 2 things at once. Let me stop the share and then onto that piece. Artificial intelligence, obviously the tools that we use on a day-to-day basis for business intelligence may or may not contain artificial intelligence aspects to it, and certainly Power BI does, and they continue to grow that functionality. So from that point of view, it's in there, although I would say the data science team is more likely to be pushing that aspect more than the business intelligence guys, but certainly the BI guys, they use that whenever they need to.
Thanks, Ben. Michael, do you have anything to add to that, or what's your perception on the BI side of things?
I am on mute. You would have thought after 2 years I'd be used to it by now. But yeah, so I don't believe that the two are that different. I think there's certainly differences between them, but some of that is historical, that some of it is cultural, if you will. But ultimately, they are trying to say the same challenges. There's new approaches, but I think they're kind of the same, right? But yes, business intelligence perhaps focuses perhaps more on describing what has happened, versus you'll find some people will define data science, and I'm not going to try and define data science as in trying to predict. But even that's a little bit of a vague line, because both arts, or both, they both try to do those things. So yeah, I don't perhaps think it's too much of a verse in verse as a, yeah, I think that there's a lot of overlap between those two concepts.
Okay, awesome, thanks. Yeah, I guess another question, I won't ask it, but it could be, is it art or is it black magic? But let's hear from the data science crew. Ncumisa, how would you define data science, and how does that differ from BI or AI and all these fancy terms you always hear about?
Yeah, well, Rishal, I think the nice thing or the beautiful thing about data science is that it encompasses all of these disciplines, right? I would say there's an element of business intelligence in data science. There's an element of artificial intelligence. But I think focusing on the artificial intelligence, how I view data science is that there's the machine learning portion of data science, right? Where if you wanted to find your way in data science, you would focus on machine learning, or you would focus on artificial intelligence. Your machine learning being where you're looking at the algorithm side of things, where you're doing statistical and mathematical focus. And then you come into your AI, where you begin to simulate human behavior, right? That is, for me, a room within the data science house. And then the third component is then the business side of it, which is where you then have to apply these technical competencies that I've just described now, which is machine learning and artificial intelligence, into solving business problems, right? So for me, that's where I see business intelligence fit in to the house, which is why I say it's got an element or a component of BI as well as artificial intelligence. Because I think with BI, the important thing is that you need to be able to give intelligence to the business after all is said and done, at the core, at the heart of it. And with data science, the end result of data science and all the technicalities and the fancy things that Harvard has called sexy, that data scientists do, you need to, at the end of the day, be able to translate that to answers to business, tell a story. And that's where the business intelligence then comes in. So I think all three are correlated and they're all part of data science, which is why data science is awesome, right?
Thanks. And Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, I think Ncumisa summed it up so well. I love that, right? Data science is a house with all these different rooms. And I think you're right. And I think business intelligence is awesome, right? And I think to be an accomplished data scientist, you do need to be able to visualize the outputs, etc. But I think, data science to me is visualization of outputs and making decisions based on visuals is great when you're trying to get humans to start making more data-driven decisions. More and more, I'm finding that as we start sort of, I guess, trusting machines a bit more, and maybe we can talk about that later. It's not just about the visual output you need. Maybe you just need the data output in an API. You need actually the machine to make a decision. So when you start talking about exceptionally large data sets or high frequency data that we need to be making decisions from, I think that's where that we've really got data science that needs to come to the fore and be able to make a decision on behalf of the human. There's no need for visualization. There's no need for business intelligence because there's not a human at the end of the process making a decision. When you go and apply for a credit card from a bank, you don't want the bank to say, okay, well, cool, Matthew's back at work tomorrow, he's going to take application to the committee, and then the committee takes like a few days to decide. You want it automated, become like standard practice, right? I apply for a credit card, I want it delivered later that day. And that's what data science enables.
Thanks, Matt. I'll give my 2 cents on it. I think as humans, we try to categorize things because, that's what's made us really the top of the food chain. We can categorize things really well and know how to deal with those categories. I think when it comes to these terms of like BI and data science or whatever the case might be, machine learning, I think we try to figure out where does it fit? Does it fit inside of this? Is it a subset of it? Is it are they mutually exclusive? I think that's where some of the confusion comes in. But if you accept it for its merits, like each of you have described, and where it's applied, what its purposes are, and where it adds value, I think you'd be far more successful in trying to categorize it very strictly. All right, and Ncumisa, you mentioned something about telling a story, which was quite interesting. And also a really good segue into this. So by the way, everyone, are you seeing the right screen here?
You see one that says, do you see AI as statistics in practice?
Yeah. Yep. Cool, thank you. I see here though, yes, one. So most people think that AI is just statistics in practice. But on the storytelling aspect, I've got another interesting one. Do you absorb information better as visuals or easily comparable numbers? So I'm thinking here, a lot of people just want to see the numbers, and based on their intuition from being in that business or being in that problem space, they can easily come up with a decision to make, whereas visuals resonate a lot better with others. So what does the room feel like here? Okay, it looks like most people prefer visuals, although it's a close one. I'd like to ask, is anyone in the audience who answered easily comparable numbers? Do you want to give your take on that? Why did you answer that way? So we got Nico, Stefan, Melissa, Adrian. Anyone want to chat?
I could speak up there, Rishal. It's Janine here. I think most of you guys on the call do already know me. I'll just maybe switch on my video just for context. So I just feel like this question could be left open to interpretation. So what does it mean by visuals? Do you mean like graphs? Do you mean like infographics? You know, that like it kind of leaves it quite open-ended. So if it's like nice comprehensive graphs, then yes, definitely visuals are easier. But if it's, you know, infographics don't always tell the right story, so then I prefer numbers.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And Sim, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so I think in the line of work that I'm in, definitely numbers are easily comparable. So I'm always using tables, numbers, and heat mapping those tables to actually see the comparison between those numbers. I guess it is a bit of a combination of both visualization and the ease of numbers and just comparability. I find that visualization sometimes tend to be a bit distorted if you're using 2 axes, for example, and sometimes your end user doesn't truly understand what you're actually trying to get across, or the 2 axes which are on a different scale. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I also think I think we can talk about it in a bit, but also visuals can deceive what the data actually says. So I'd like to ask the panel. It's on the same topic. So at the same time, you know, do you think visuals? How do you think data should be represented? But also, what's the role of storytelling in the world of data? All of a sudden, I can't see hands and names now. Zoom. Sven?
Yeah, thanks. I put my hand up a little bit earlier. I'm happy to answer this particular question in the sense that what's the right answer? I think it actually depends on the audience. So if you're presenting to financially minded people, they typically prefer rows and columns of numbers. They feel happier with that kind of information, whereas the majority of other audiences prefer the visualizations that they can more easily see the answer. And whenever we design reports, you always want to make sure that you're comparing it to something. So don't just give yesterday's sales value or last month's sales value. You've always got to compare it to something. So whether it's to the average daily sales, or whether it's the sales from last year for the same period, you've always got, or against a target or a budget, you've always got to compare it against something. Otherwise, unless you're a very expert audience and you know the context or the comparator, you actually won't know if that number is good or bad. So the key there is comparison. And then in terms of storytelling, I mean, what's really important there is people understand where you are now, but you've got to explain, where did you come from? How did you get to this position you are now, whether the sales are up or whether they're down. And then you've got to basically be able to explain what happened from then to now. You've got to explain, you know, what are the root causes that you've analyzed to decide why it's gone in the direction it's gone. And then from there, you've got to say, well, keep doing more of this or keep doing less of that in order to continue the trend that you've observed, assuming it's a positive trend or obviously the opposite. But yes, so storytelling, I think, is essential. And it comes down to the audience is the summary of my comments.
Okay, cool. And I think you were talking about comparing it to last year or whatever in your first part of the answer. And I think that in itself is telling a story. You're not just giving a number of here's sales this month. You wanna compare it to something to make a point, right? Ncumisa?
So I would say it's a bit of both. They're both important depending on the audience that you're speaking to, right? But I think oftentimes as data people or the people who understand the data that can speak, because rows and rows of data don't mean anything to anyone if they're not demonstrated in a way that makes sense, which is why storytelling is one of the most important skills that data professionals should have. While the financial people can understand the rows and rows of data and can go in and dive into that most of the time, the broader audience that needs to consume the information that we get from the data is not necessarily people that are willing to look at to look at numbers. It's not even people that are data literate, right? Because data literacy is still a challenge in data citizens holistically right now. In data professionals and just consumers of data, data literacy is a problem. And I think for me, that's why then data visualization would be more important, or would be the one that takes center stage in this case. Because once you acquire the ability to tell the story of the organization that you're speaking to, then there's no need for your visuals to be incorrect or to skew the information. As long as you understand the domain to which you are giving the information to, it's very important to understand that data storytelling and visualizing data is not a one-size-fits-all thing that you can just apply. It's important to understand the context and the business domain that you're speaking to, so that you can bring visuals that will make sense to those people. And that, I think, is a skill that is oftentimes underestimated by us data professionals, because there's so much emphasis on the other competencies that seem more technical. And we end up missing that. And that's why sometimes we feel like we don't trust visuals and all those things. But I think once you hone your skill of being a storyteller with data, then you should be able to tell an accurate story to the business in a way that makes sense to them using data.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. So I guess the follow-up question to the panel is, how do you figure out how to create a story, right? So where do you start? You know, you spoke about an audience. Audiences differ. The problems we're solving differ. So when you figuring out, you know, how you're going to tell a story, what's the process you follow or your approach? Yes, Matt.
I'm being so polite. I don't usually raise my hands, but I just see the other panelists doing it, and then I feel like I have to be polite and also raise my hand. I think that's where your sort of business or domain expertise is what we call it, right, fits in. I think your domain expertise will guide you a lot in terms of how you tell the story and what story needs to be told. Now, obviously, the story you're going to tell people in banking and the story you're going to tell people in marketing and the story you're going to tell people in a healthcare company are very, very different. Very different. So it's not a one size fits all. And that's why that domain expertise is so important, and why domain expertise is so important in data science. And I mean, you know, Ncumisa and I talk about this often, that domain expertise is really what differentiates like a good data scientist from a great data scientist. So obviously, I think even as team data science, you know, I think storytelling and visualization is exceptionally important when there is a human that needs to make the decision. I guess where I think data science takes it to the next level is perhaps when we move to a world where the human doesn't always need to make the decision, or when it can be part of the decision-making process. And that to me is delving maybe a little bit more into data science.
Okay, cool. And someone from team business intelligence, do you have anything to share about your kind of approach when you want to tell stories?
Sven, you want to go at that?
Yeah, look, I briefly touched on it earlier. To me, it's obviously the position now in terms of the current statistic or measurements. Where did you come from? What caused that root cause analysis? And then obviously the decisions that flow from that. So it is, you need to start, it's a journey, and you need to from somewhere to somewhere, and you know what caused it and what happens thereafter.
Okay, so I guess in summary, it's kind of what's the questions being asked, what's the history of the concept surrounding that question, or even that question itself, it could have been changed, and how can we leverage data to answer that and present it in a meaningful way. Does that capture it somewhat accurately?
I think so.
Okay, cool. I wanted to show, Ncumisa spoke about visualizing stuff. I wanted to show you this thing I did last year. It's a bit of a silly one though, but it was CO2 emissions over time, but as art. And I just thought this was interesting because it's meaningfully showing you, you know, how much pollution has increased. while still it being a graph.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Anecdote. All right. Second part in this kind of section, I wanna figure out from your experience. Everyone in this panel has been working towards adding some sort of real value, to other different customers or in a specific environment. And what I'd like to figure out is how much of data science and business intelligence and machine learning and all of this stuff, how much of this is hype and how much of it is actually adding real value to businesses. So it sounds like a bit of a facetious question, but I remember when the hype kind of started, everyone was investing in it without actually understanding what value these things are going to provide. But I think that's starting to change. And yeah, I'd like to open up to the group. Does anyone have any experience on that? Ncumisa?
I think, Rishal, if we're going to talk specifically about data science, when we talk about hype and when it became effective, right? I think it's very important for us to look back at where data science comes from. And I think when I studied it and when I look further, it's been effective. I mean, dating back as the 16th century, if you look at it, and how it was applied to medical disciplines, to astronomical disciplines, to various disciplines to bring breakthroughs in those industries. It's been a long time that data science has been effective in aiding humanity, right? But I think that has beautifully evolved over the years, right? And its effectiveness as well is evolving and adapting to the way in which as society we are living. And I think when it then gained the hype or the noise around it, I think it's with the rise of big data and the fact that it's now being applied to all this digital the digital life that we're living right now. And obviously now having every publication writing about it because right, we have better ways of communicating these messages and making things known. Obviously Harvard, that Harvard article played a huge role in calling data science the sexiest job of the century, right? And from there, you saw like every little publication and every organization now wanted to understand what is this data science, and every professional wanted to understand how do I bridge into data science. But if we look at it before the hype, it has been effective since long before most of us were here and even our grandparents are here. And it's been evolving beautifully with time. And when Harvard made that declaration, or all these publications made that declaration, then all of us wanted to find out what is it about, right? And we started plugging in, and it has been beautifully evolving, bringing forth, topics such as AI to the fore, topics that have long been there, but with the rise of the popularity of data science, then gained all this hype as well. And I think it's still going far in its effectiveness, in the sense that we didn't think so many years ago that our reality of how we live with the Internet of Things, big data, having to process unstructured data, videos, sound, all these things, and having to apply all of these methods that we're applying to various things to gain insights. We didn't think that we would have the ability to do that. And I believe that we don't know where we're going to be in 10 years or 20 years time, but looking at the history of data science and its ability to evolve with the way in which we are living life and to evolve with its ability to answer business questions, I think it's going to be around and it's going to be effective for a very long time. And perhaps at some point the hype will die out, right? Because we'll have more data scientists than we have business problems, maybe in future, because there are other industries that they needed the professionals. And before you knew it, the professionals were redundant because they were everywhere, because everyone went and studied that thing. But I do think that the discipline will outlive its hype, and it's going to continue to be effective as it has evolved over the years. So I think to answer your question, its effectiveness has long been around, and perhaps its hype has risen with the digital way of living life and the rise of big data and all these fancy things, but it's definitely going to outlive its hype and continue to be effective.
I know we're going to go to Yanela's question now, and I want to hear it as well, because I think Yanela's asking some amazing questions on the side. But I was going to say, can you guys see why I brought Ncumisa onto my team, right? As I don't have to say anything, she says it all. Plus, she references Harvard studies. I mean, team data science.
I have another question, but I think yeah, Yanela, do you want to unmute and maybe ask some of your questions? You had some interesting thoughts there.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry man, I think I'm a bit later. I was very intrigued by the topic you had, the question, do you absorb information better as visualizations or easily comparable numbers? I couldn't rate the question. I couldn't respond to it immediately because I found it unfair in that it says, do you absorb information? Okay, so it's process and absorb information better as a visualization or as a number. So if you logged into your bank account now and your bank said on your check account, you are 60%, it showed you a gauge that said you are 60% spend of what you have in your check account, would you be able to absorb that? Right? That type of thinking. If you think, I don't know if you've got a lot of South African audience there. If you think of the COVID numbers that we get daily, so if they plotted the map of South Africa and they color coded it, and they did not show us that Gauteng had 1018 COVID cases yesterday, could we absorb it? So you see, I'm going backwards and forth to say, I think Ncumisa, and I'm the only one saying your name right, Ncumisa. Ncumisa, I think you did say that it really depends on the audience. And I really wanted to make that point. I think I forgot to lower my hand after Ncumisa spoke. But yeah, it's interesting. And Matthew, I note there that you say business people are boring. My question on the side was, as human beings that go to work for 8 hours, right? We absorb information and knowledge and insights in a particularly traditional way. We watch TV, correct? We listen to the radio or we read. However, as professionals, when we get to that space for 8 hours, we have the tendency to want to change that well-established practice. And I've always found that quite interesting as to why do we insist on doing that? That's what I wanted to say. Thank you guys. But I know I'm a bit late, but yeah, I forgot to lower my hands. I'll keep an eye on it next time.
Great questions and great points.
Yeah, those are really good points. And I also like that question you asked, how do you visualize stuff for blind people? Because I think we're moving to an age where you need to be accessible and cater for everybody. All sorts of diversity of people, language, cultures. Ncumisa, I'm sorry I was pronouncing your name wrong. And next time, just correct me. Just say, Rishal, you're an idiot.
No, I think Yanela is playing the advantage that he's also closer like me. You did it well, Rishal. He's got an unfair advantage on all of you.
Awesome. Does anyone have any commentary on what Yanela spoke about?
If I can maybe just add, it's quite interesting because I've actually never thought about it before in this manner. So some people who know me might know that my mother's disabled. She had polio when she was very young and she's been disabled her whole life. And I get very upset, obviously I've grown up with a disabled person my whole life, and I get very upset when she can't get into a shopping center because there's steps and she's in a wheelchair or a mobility vehicle. And I get very upset when things aren't accessible to her, when we go to a place and there's no disabled bathroom. But you don't think about it when it comes to the data world, how you make it accessible to a very wide audience. People that maybe are blind or colorblind, or anything like that. And I mean, it is interesting. And I know colorblindness is obviously not as big a thing as some other maybe disabilities. I'm slightly colorblind, by the way. But I mean, even all these little things, people's natural languages, etc. People's, Ncumisa said it so well, data literacy. Data literacy is such a big issue. So maybe people aren't actually that literate when they can't see the numbers well, but they respond better to pictures or visuals, or even just or a combination of them both, which is a great point about data visualization. So I think it's something really good to think about. And Yanela, I think such a great question that I actually probably even haven't given as much thought to before. So thanks for bringing it up.
I mean, just to comment on that colorblindness, Matthew, about 4% of the population is colorblind, right? So, you know, I don't know how many people this, what are we, about 100 people in? So three of the people in this audience are colorblind right now. And it's an important thing to remember, especially when we're visualizing things. One of the most common colorblindness is actually confusion between red and green, which just happen to be the two colors that we use to depict, things, right? So if you're thinking about, somebody mentioned sort of heat maps and stuff, very often red and green. To somebody who's colorblind, it's all just brown, right? So accessibility is definitely it's a bigger thing, correctly so. And there's a lot of, if you look at the content, people are speaking about it more often, and tools are becoming better at it, right? Yeah.
Thanks. I had a follow-up question to the one about hype and value. So does anyone, I was saying there was hype investment being made without, I guess, revealing any sensitive information about your businesses or customers. Does anyone have any examples, even conceptually, of where data science, business intelligence has actually, had a real impact on return of investment on it, or even kind of innovating in that business area in which they wouldn't be able to otherwise? Yeah, Sven?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to give actual numbers away, but just in theory or in broad terms, as an analyst, one needs to actually compare the before and after, and that obviously is what makes business intelligence worthwhile or valuable, because before your efficiency was X, now it is Y. That turns into a performance improvement of a rand value of a particular amount, or you've got a critical stock of certain items. You seem to keep running out of it, but if you can visualize it and see more obviously what the pattern is in terms of your usage, you can make sure that you don't run out when you need it. Again, the key point there is visualizing the data makes it easier to act on. Then you can have, that's working capital. Previously, I mentioned efficiencies, but obviously the list goes on and on and on in terms of how you can benefit or monetize the information that you've got. And you can always put a rand value to it if you apply your mind that way, and it needs to be done, because otherwise you don't know if you're succeeding. You've got to be able to measure the before and after. There are plenty of other examples. I'll just leave it there for now.
Great, thanks. Matt?
I think one of the, obviously data science are adding real value, right? I'll talk, I guess my context is kind of banking, so I'll go back to sort of banking context. Let me specifically talk about a retail bank, which isn't really part of bank I'm in. But in a retail banking context, I think some of the things that people take for granted is heavily like machine learning, data science driven. Things like the fact that when you go and tap your credit card somewhere, in a split second between that payment is being made, we're assessing if it's fraudulent behavior. With quite a high degree of accuracy, by the way. That's bloody impressive, right? Again, things like providing loans, pre-approving loans. When people go into the banking app and they see all the loans have been pre-approved, that's data science at work. Think about the amount of human hours would have taken to analyze all of that, manually. And now, obviously, we can firstly speed up the process and perform it a little bit better. So there's definitely advantages. Now, with all advantages, there are disadvantages and a variety of disadvantages that we can speak about later. But certainly the value is quite clear, right? And one other thing I just want to point out, because I think it's important to speak about, is that a lot of people get concerned. They're like, but hang on a second, if you're automating all these processes and people were previously involved, or what about things like jobs and employment? And that's important to talk about when it comes to data science, because we live in a country where we've got to be realistic about our employment rate, right? It's not great. And there is unemployment. We've got to say, but is data science been replacing jobs? And the answer is often that, yes, it will replace some jobs, but it will actually create other areas of employment. We've seen that, right? Because a huge amount of data scientists and people going into data science, a field that didn't exist even really 5, 10, 6 years ago to the degree it has now. So it's definitely creating opportunities, and it's creating opportunities for like subject matter experts, and it's creating opportunities for people to obviously work quite closely and oversee these decisions. And the final thing I'll just say on that is there's a great talk that, I don't know if it's online, but one of my mates runs an data science machine learning company for the manufacturing, and he gets a question a lot: that's proper AI? Is AI replacing jobs? He says no, because the people that it's actually replacing are very, very few in the country, and they're all about to retire, and then we'll actually have none of those sort of specialists in that manufacturing industry that these AI machines are really assisting with. So it is quite anyway, it's something to talk about. We don't have all the answers, but it's definitely something to know.
Thanks, Matt. I think it is a double-edged sword. Like that loan one is interesting, right? So surely you need historic data to figure out how best to give a loan. But there's so many examples where bias in that data give people or classify people incorrectly, right? I'm sure everyone knows about that story with the recruitment AI that kept hiring white males. That was like the key factor. I mean, you can't ignore that, right? Because that historic data shapes the decisions that were made in history, and also some biases that are here today. And I think that same thinking, whenever something like with qualification is required, like loans, things like that, that's particularly important to kind of scrutinize that data and curate it in a way to make sure. I don't think anything can ever be unbiased, completely unbiased, but try our best to make it as unbiased as possible. Sven, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to bring something into the topic, into the conversation, and Matthew sort of opened the door to it earlier. So I'd like to just touch back on that. So, I mean, this whole conversation is about data science versus business intelligence. And we've already touched on, in many ways, they're very, very similar. And there's another area where they're very similar, and that is they don't function on their own. They function as part of a team or a collaboration. So when Matthew's talking about, losing jobs, remember, there's actually a whole lot of people in the background or involved in the entire process that are absolutely essential in order to make a data scientist successful or a business intelligence person successful. So whether that's, someone who's really good at visualizations, or someone who's really good at converting the business's needs from, specification sessions into deliverables and managing those projects, or whether it's someone who's particularly good at wrangling data and cleaning it and shaping it and getting it usable. And of course, the list goes on, data architects, data engineers, business, data owners. And as I said, it goes on and on. You can be particularly good at programming, your coding, so that you can do your mathematical formulas for your analysis. But the key there is actually, you can't do it. There's no sort of one person who can do all of that. You actually have to operate within a team. Obviously, some corporates are big enough that they can have their own team. Smaller companies need to outsource certain things. And in small companies, you will find that there's one person who has a bit of skill in each of those areas, but they would have to outsource certain things and just try and get that complementary knowledge, because you can't actually do a successful job. In fact, maybe I can just point out, if you've got the perfect data and you've done the perfect visualization, but the mathematics is incorrect, that doesn't help you. And you can tweak any of those things. You've got perfect mathematics, perfect visualization, but your data is in the wrong place, or it's slow, or it's it's badly managed. That also doesn't help you. And obviously, plenty more examples like that. So team efforts is really a big point I think we need to focus on.
Awesome, thanks. Ncumisa, I see your hands raised as well. Nico and Yanela, I know your hands were raised as well. I'm going to get to you right after this.
Yeah, look at you, Rishal. You're such a fast learner. I think I agree with Sven and everything that is said right now, that collaboration, I always say that in data analytics, we all have to find our voice, find your data voice. The data voice speaks to what it is that you can best perform in. within the data analytics field, right? Find that place and perform your best, because in doing your best, you enable the next person. If you're good at architecture, do architecture to the best of your ability so that the data wrangler or the programmer can do his part, the data visualizer can do his part, and all of that. I'm just hopping on to what Sven has said now. And coming back to ethics, right? Coming back to that bias and how AI has failed in many ways. I think I can take it back to the evolution of data science that I mentioned earlier, because now with the hype of data science and artificial intelligence and companies putting big monies towards having these solutions in their companies, comes the rise of AI ethics, which is a topic that has now taken center stage to say, wait a minute, yes, we've done this advancement, but now we see there's room for improvement, because when we look at historical data, I think someone said in the comments that history has always been biased. Now that we are using large, huge sizes of data sets from historic to aid data science and artificial intelligence, how do we ensure that it's ethical? How do we ensure that there's fairness, that it encompasses what we spoke about earlier? How do we ensure that we take care of people who are less able than others? How do we make sure that we take care of people who have historically been discriminated against, to make sure that now data science and artificial intelligence doesn't perpetrate certain behaviors? But now comes a new discipline that you get a whole lot of people focusing in and trying to find a solution to say, right, as we go towards the next century, we need to make sure that data science evolves with humanity in its fairness, in its ethics as well. So there's a whole entire focus that is risen as part of that. So as much as it's a problem, there are solutions being worked on it, which speaks to the beauty of the evolution of data science and artificial intelligence, and even technology as a whole.
Definitely.
Yeah, wanted to say that.
Thank you. I think that was very well said. Nico?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. I think one of the success stories of data science, as well as visualizations, and something that's quite overlooked, is our applications like Waze. I mean, this is taking a lot of data and providing you input to make decisions that, number one, are going to save you time and save you money when it comes to petrol. And I would argue that Waze on its own probably saves over $100 billion a year globally, if you take into consider time savings as well as petrol savings. And it just shows you the power of visualization, big data coming in, as well as analytics to make sure that the route algorithms and all of these things are coming together in a perfect format. And I think it's a format that everyone can understand.
Yeah, Nico, I totally agree with that. I mean, just on Saturday, I know Waze is owned by Google, so Google Maps uses some of Waze's data. And there's a road next door to me that has construction, but only during the morning. And it only started a week ago. Within that week, it figured out that road doesn't get traffic during that time. There's a detour, and it didn't even give it to me as an option. However, when I was coming back a few hours later, it was an option again on the maps. So I definitely agree that's really powerful. And also an interesting thought to just think globally how much time has been saved through something like Google Maps or Waze. Yeah, thanks for that. Yanela, do you still have something to say?
Yeah, sure. Earlier on, Rishal, I think, look, so many subjects have come into play now, but earlier on when we were talking about AI and what it has done, I wanted to share a story. So I've been in consulting for quite some years. So around 2012-13, one of the banks in South Africa invited us to do a POC. So they gave us this data, credit card data. So, and they said in that data, they suspect there's fraud that we had to prove. So at the end, what we had to come say we've identified this fraud or not. So AI was still being introduced, fairly new at that stage. So it had not really advanced to where it is today. So we looked at the data. So what happened is one person who lives in Pretoria, I'm not sure if you guys are South African, this person lived in Pretoria. They transacted in Pretoria all the time during work hours and home hours. Then they went to Joburg. So what happened, their card was stolen without them realizing it. So the person remained in Joburg doing whatever they were doing. Then some minutes later in Pretoria, the card transacted. So when you went to the bank to say, listen, this is fraud, the bank said, no, man, this is normally where you transact, within your vicinity where you work. How we solved it with the human element, was to say, someone in the team said, doesn't this person have a mobile app on their phone? And we said, yes. And they said, well, you send them a 2FA, right? When a transaction is occurring, can you please look where the geoposition was of his phone when that 2FA went to his phone? Now, I was just giving as an example to say, the human element, actually, that AI ability to process huge volumes at a speed that we can never even try to get to is really amazing. But what we feed those technologies is amazing. So the Waze example as well, I love it actually. So the construction by your place was not Waze, it was humans telling technology that here is roadworks, right? So Waze did not do anything miraculous, with algorithms to establish that something is happening. It was told, then later on it said, well, I won't let you go there, Rishal. So I'm really passionate about the human element in terms of what comes with data. And I do appreciate the science and the technology that AI does bring. I just wanted to share that story to say sometimes as humans, we still beat technology.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that.
But of course, what tech tends to do it better once they figure it out. So once tech knows it, then it does it better, faster.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, in your example there, it would be impossible for a team of humans to write down someone's geoposition every time a transaction is made, right? But also to be impossible for a computer to come up with that idea. Hey, let's compare where that person was. Like, how do you engineer that? That's just a human mind that's putting things together, came up with an idea. Okay, let's move to a bit of a different topic, and I'd like some interaction here. We're nearing we're in the third quarter of, or the last third of this session, and let's talk a little bit about the skills involved in, being a data scientist or being a BI developer or an analyst, or there's so many different role names these days. So do you think it's critical for any data-oriented person to know how to code? All right, so far with some votes in, we've got, it's catching up. Okay, it seems like we have a really interesting audience where on most things there's kind of a divide. But let's kick this off. So I'd like to ask the panel at a high level, can you explain what the difference is between some of these roles we often come across? You see data engineers, data scientists, data analysts. How would you describe the role and responsibilities of these different people? Yeah, Matt.
So busy putting up my hands, I even forgot what the mute button was. I think the first thing what was quite interesting is why are there different roles if they never used to be a little while ago? And it's quite interesting. I actually read an analogy to surgery. When surgery first sort of came around, was professionalized in hospitals around the 1900s, early there, I'm not sure. The surgeon did everything. The surgeon was responsible for making the solution to clean the tools. The surgeon was responsible for finding the right tools. The surgeon was responsible for the after surgery care. The surgeon was responsible for everything. As the medical profession professionalized, it became different roles. The surgeon did this, and then you had the lab assistant that maybe made the solution to clean the tools, and you had all these different roles that are involved. The surgeon doesn't do the aftercare anymore, somebody else does it, etc., advisors on the medicine, whatever the case might be. So as the data science profession is professionalizing as well, You're moving away from this place where the data scientist did everything. The data scientist cleaned the data. The data scientist found the data. The data scientist built the data pipelines. The data scientist built the model. And the data scientist built the visualization and presented to business and pretty much did everything. And in some companies, depending on the maturity curve, you still have data scientists that do everything, you know, that are like kind of like full stack developers and do everything. But as we get mature and data science starts, you know, we start expecting more of it. We need people that focus on individual tasks. Say, well, a data scientist is really best spent building models. Now, if they're spending their time cleaning data or building data pipelines, they're not optimizing their time, and therefore we've got to hire other people to do that. And that's why we have now data engineers who are responsible for moving data from one place to another, you know, to ensure that data is always available for models, and we have all these data pipelines. And you've got data quality experts and data management area that looks at things like data quality. Data ethics, of course, will cover everything. And data science ethics, absolutely a massive, massive point, which I think many people, at least from the Joburg Data Science Meetup, will know I'm very passionate about, and I've given numerous talks on ethics and how we think about ethics when it comes to data science. That's where some of the roles at least come from. But also why in some organizations you won't have all these roles. You also have a data scientist that is kind of expected to do everything. And, you know, as Ncumisa said, it's going to be many, many years. Data science is going to be around for a long time. And as we grow, it's going to start to become more professionalized. And then we're going to see everything from a person who just builds data visuals and data art to a person who just works with data pipelines and sourcing data.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You know, as it matures more, we learn more about the complexities and then require specialized roles. Michael?
Yeah, so just on the roles, and I think I've heard it a couple of times tonight, and I hear it frequently, and maybe that it was actually one of the starting questions, which didn't actually come up, is what is those misconceptions about BI? And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that BI is about reporting. We've heard it a couple of times tonight already, and BI consists of multiple levels, right? And I've worked in BI for 20 years. If I spend 5% of my day doing visualizations, or 5% of my career doing visualizations, it's a lot. Okay, so we really started off with that ETL layer, which was, today we call that the data engineer. Then there is the data warehousing phase, right? That's where the data modeler comes in, right? Or perhaps that would be now called the data scientist. Then you've got the visualizations, you know, you've always had those domain experts, but you've got those roles have always existed. You know, BI obviously goes back to an era where we were in the very into that waterfall model. So things have certainly changed the way we approach these problems, but those roles still exist. And we find them in both sides. And I think there's a couple of people have actually said, I don't think a pure data scientist has ever existed. Perhaps if you were working on a small project, you could do that. But data engineering is difficult enough that, you know, you might be a data engineer who can do a little bit of statistics and throw a couple of charts together. You might be a great visualizer who you can ingest a CSV, but doing all of those things is incredibly unlikely to do them well, right? So Sven said, you know, it's a team. It's always been a team sport, and those skills are still, they're the same, right? We've just got better tools, but it's kind of the same thing.
Awesome, thanks, Michael. Sven?
Yeah, Michael, I enjoyed that answer. Thank you for that. And just the stats earlier on, I saw 13 saying yes for coding, 9 saying no for coding. I don't know if it's changed recently, but obviously I think depending on which company you're in, if you're in a small company and you want to try and do any form of analytics or any kind of business intelligence or data science, clearly you're the person that is going to have to do the coding. Obviously, if you're getting into bigger organizations, you could very easily avoid coding altogether, although knowledge of coding would be useful. But as you specialize, you might be the visualization expert. You don't have to have anything to do with coding. And there's some people who are so well suited to coding and others who are just terrified of it. You know, it's just, that's one of the points I'd also like to make. If there are people in the audience who are saying, oh, well, I'm sort of compelled, or I'm attracted to this Harvard thing of saying data science is so sexy, you know, sign me up, I want the big paycheck and whatever. I would suggest that you think about sort of your own personal wiring and your attributes and say, well, you know, if you're someone who likes to deal with patterns and processes versus you're a dreamer. Now, neither of them are right or wrong. You need them all in a team, but, you know, solutions architect might be big picture dreamer type person. and someone else who's following processes and routine tasks is more of a coder type person. I'm just generalizing a little bit here. Similarly, if you're awkward in front of customers, well, then you need to think about which role in that process that you fulfill versus, you're quite happy sitting coding in a quiet room, just churning out wonderful optimized code and, moving data efficiently from one place to the next and so on. So again, don't be attracted by, the hype and the sex appeal or whatever. Go with more about, what you're passionate about and your wiring to choose where you fit in that whole equation.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that that speaks to, there's a good comment in the chat. Should it be coding or rather being able to utilize a tool that will help convey the story that's needed for the task at hand? And I think that's a good point. And I think you've covered that. And also, I'd say, just to tack on to what you said, look at your strengths, look at where you want to, what kind of career you want to have, what your future goals are, and make the relevant choice. But don't be afraid that you're going to kind of pigeonhole yourself and get, become a specialist in this very niche area. Everyone, I think you get generalists that are still specialists, or people that are even specialized in being generalists, like I do, I guess. So I'd say that fear aspect, don't be afraid of like taking a leap or trying something new and then being stuck in it. Okay, and then Ncumisa?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I totally agree with Sven. And I think this conversation takes me back to what I was saying earlier about that it's important to find your voice, right? In the data house, like find your room and find your space that you're gonna be great in. That's gonna require a lot of self-awareness. Like be honest with yourself, right? About what is it that makes you happy, because you wanna do a job that makes you happy. Just because Harvard says that data science is sexy, and maybe they were referring to the statistical and technical side or aspect of it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be sexy for all of us. So it's important for all of us to find the things that speak directly to us. I remember when I started with BI back in the day, BI, data warehousing, ETL, visualization, stakeholder engagement, data quality, data governance were all in one basket. You needed to, all of those things in one. But now looking at the same team and the same company as it evolves, right? It has become better by breaking those things apart into and allowing people to find their space. And when I spoke earlier, I said you can break down data science into these three rooms. There's the ML, there's the AI, and there's the business. That's like a high level summing it up. So when we speak about whether code or no code, I say the business aspect of it usually does not entail a lot of coding, but you need to understand code. You need to have that ability. I don't think in this space, you can completely run away from the technical aspect of it, because what makes you effective in interacting with business and selling a solution to the business is you yourself are understanding what that solution is capable of and what its limitations are. And to understand that, you need to dive deep into the technicalities of it, right? But when we talk about selling things to business, you need to also sell the data governance to business, which falls part of the data aspect of the whole house, that is data science. You need to let people know how to interact properly with their CRM systems so that we can get good quality data at the end. Because data quality doesn't start with the data engineer cleaning things up and doing fancy code to clean things up. It starts with the users of the systems that generate the data, to say to them, when you interact with your systems or when you interact in different aspects of the data, whether you are collecting the voice of the customer, whether you are collecting data for us to get to know our customer, whatever it is that you're doing, do it in such a manner that in a governable manner that will allow us to have quality data, that will allow us to have data that can allow this solution, this technical solution, to answer your questions effectively and in a timely manner. Because if we have to clean data first, if we have to enforce some things, after the fact, after the data has been generated, we're going to spend more time. We're going to have to hire more people to clean the data, but if we do the right thing. So it's a full circle thing, but each person, you need to find where you fit into that thing. And if I can make an example about myself, when I started in I thought I wanted to be a data engineer. I mean, seriously, I thought I wanted to be a data engineer until I realized that actually, no, I don't enjoy coding that much, but that plays a huge role now in how I'm able to interpret or to sell a solution, or even to suggest a solution, an analytic solution to the business. It plays a huge role in understanding that. So while you can't run away from the coding perspective of it, it's important to know that you don't have to be a master coder for you to do it. There's the business aspect, which I feel is downplayed a lot sometimes. There's the business aspect that is very important to making data science effective as a whole. And it goes back to that part of each one of us playing your role. But I think it's time that we dive into those roles. What are the roles that exist within data science? And why is each role important? Why is the data governance and data quality and data literacy and data evangelism important? And why is the technical ability, statistical understanding, mathematical understanding important as well? So that we can also educate data professionals as they come up, for them to know that you don't have to be everything. You can find a space that makes you happy so that you can master your part without stifling people.
Well said, Ncumisa. Thanks a lot. I think you've answered some of it, but maybe this is a bit more practical. I see a question from Tseho, who's asking, what is the best entry point for someone who is new to data science or business intelligence? Should one start broad, i.e. perform all tasks involved and then specialize later? Now on that, I also had some questions about the skills. So personality attributes that people might have, or the kind of skills or tools, a knowledge of tools that might be beneficial to BI or data science. So now I've wrapped it all into a much larger question, but I'll repeat it. What is the best entry point for someone who is new to data science or business intelligence? Okay, who was first? Ncumisa was first.
Yes, so I love Tseho's question. I love it so much because I think if we all answer that question at the beginning, it will shorten us finding the sweet spot for ourselves within the data analytics space. Because I do feel like a lot of us bounce around in certain spaces before we find the place where we want to settle in. So I think to answer Tseho's question, I'm going to say that depends on how self-aware you are as a person, right? Are you certain of the things that will make you happy within the data space? If I make an example about myself again, when I started, I had no clue about business intelligence or data warehousing or anything. So I had to go broad and find that space that would be the thing for me, right? Is it going to be data science? Which part of data science do I want to settle in and grow old in? So it all depends on how self-aware you are. I thought I loved coding, right? But then I realized that my relationship with coding is that I tolerate it because it's just that sibling that I can't get rid of. You know, we're born together, we live together, we die together. But I do know that I don't have to be a coder. We're not twins, we're not identical. We are not, that's just like what it is, but I have to tolerate you because you're part of the family, right? So that question, I think it starts with, how self-aware are you? Do you understand what makes you happy? Do you love coding? Then start exploring in the coding side of things. But I don't think you can completely avoid going broad and tasting all the waters for you to find that space, because you can't know something unless you really try it, right? So it's a bit of both. How self-aware are you to guide yourself in where to start, because you're the best person that can answer that question? Are you more passionate about processes and governance and making sure that things are sitting where they're supposed to be sitting? Are you more architectural? But understand what makes you happy and then go there. But if you do not go there, go taste everything. Take a few years and understand everything, because that plays a huge part and it's a huge advantage later on. Because like Sven said earlier, in data analytics, in data science, in BI, you get to interact. It's a team effort. It's not only a one person thing. And if you understand the language that Matthew speaks in his role, you better able to interact and engage with Matthew and collaborate to get the best for you to move forward as a team. And if you understand what a business analyst is looking for when they're collecting requirements, you are better able to then enable them and give them the technical information that they need for them to interpret the requirements properly. You better able to connect the dots, right? So it's an advice. You can go at large, go taste everything, try everything out, develop yourself as much as possible in as many things as possible. And there you will find the areas that make you happy. But that's going to play, like, don't be wary of the fact that you have to try everything, because it plays a huge role in how you move forward. And I think one of the things that you need, the skills that you need to have as a data professional that is perhaps not technical, is that you need to be able to creatively think of solutions within your space, right? But how do you creatively think of something that you do not fully understand? As an artist, you know the different textures that exist, you know the different colors and everything that an artist uses. So you better able to move them around to create a beautiful picture. So it's the same thing with data analytics. When you have that knowledge, it enables your creativity. If I'm speaking to a data engineer right now and they tell me that, yeah, but we're going to struggle to ingest this thing from here to there because there's this limitation, I'm able to engage and drive the conversation here, but why can't we, you know, try this route as well? Have you tried that? Have you tried that? Because I understand how the source system is shaped, and I understand how our ETL or engineering architecture is shaped. So I'm able to contribute to that solution, to that conversation, and bring that creativity in how we're going to solve the question. And at the end of the day, answer the business questions that need to be answered with the data efforts that we're all putting on the table. So I think, to summarize, to answer Tejo's questions, if you're self-aware and you know what makes you happy about this space, you've experimented, you've played around, then go do that thing. And if it doesn't work for you, change and do something else. If you don't know, don't be afraid to go in at large. Develop yourself in all areas and try everything. That will also play as a huge advantage later on, because you will have a broad understanding of the space.
Awesome, thanks so much. And I'd probably just add to that, if you want help, if you want guidance, there's so many people around. I don't know if I can speak for the panelists here, but I'm pretty sure most would be okay with anyone reaching out to ask for advice and ways moving forward. The details, resources, I'm pretty sure anyone, including myself here, would be more than happy. I'd like to hear from team.
We've a great Instagram account that you can follow as well, with great resources and lectures and everything as well, just by the way.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. I'd like to hear from team BI. Do you have any, Matt, not Matt, Michael, you've been a bit quiet. Do you have any pointers for people getting started?
Yeah, so there's been comments. Really, it's that willingness to explore, engage, test. I think that's where the world's changing. If you think about what BI was, and I think there's a misconception about what BI is and what data science is. But if we think about data science as being that scientific method, right? That coming up with an idea and then testing for it. That's just that curiosity. And if you've got that curiosity to explore and to validate your answers, you know, that's a good place. Now, how do you get into that is always difficult, especially in big corporate South Africa. They want to hire you and put you in a box, right? That's, if you think about the typical banking role, you're going to be shoved into a data engineering role or a visualization role. So, you know, you really need to, I mean, I don't know, perhaps smaller enterprises are sort of better at this, or finding a hobby, right? You know, what are you doing after hours and how are you playing with these things? A lot of these tools are very accessible nowadays. You know, there's almost everything is available for free to some degree. Just take it, download it. If you think about in Power BI, I think there's about 4 or 5 challenges, like, you know, every once a month or once a week, they've got these little data sets, they're publishing a data set. You can hear my kids having a huge kerfuffle behind me, but joys of work from home, right? But yeah, and they got these little sample data sets and learn that way, right? And then you get this, you sort of publish your results and everybody sort of comments on one another. And then depending on the competition, right, they'll, somebody will go and review it and watch somebody else dissect somebody else's work. And that is a good way. There was a question about should you get a university degree? University degrees are useful, but they're not going to perhaps teach you how to engage in the new world. So having a degree is certainly helpful, and especially if you're going to go down that very data science, statistics oriented route, right? But I think it's just you can really, actually engaging with the data and engaging with people who need answers. There's so many people who need answers. If you're willing to give them answers or help them get their own answers, you will build a career for yourself. And that's the best way, I think, to actually get going.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I agree completely with that. I think on that, university degree topic, you don't need it, but it provides a good foundation. But those foundational elements are available freely these days. But I think that element that Michael spoke about, where other people are giving you advice on what you've done, and you're learning from that, right? You're learning from others that are more experienced, or even applying it in a real world scenario. So you might not be in the data space at all, but we always have these gut feelings of what should be done, but can you prove that with any sort of data or any metrics? Take it as like a pet project, a pet, a tech spike, if you will, to sort of learn the ways of doing these things. And I think the more you do that, the more your intuition will develop. And then you can start making decisions about if you want to specialize or if it's an area you want to pursue. All right, we are basically out of time. I think I guess the headline for this event was a bit clickbaity, because I don't think there's a clear winner. I don't think there can be a clear winner. I think these different disciplines and concepts fit together. Without one, you can't do the other. And it's also like a chicken and an egg kind of thing as well, right? In the one side, you're asking the right questions, you're understanding how this applies to a business and impacts it. On the other side, you might not even have questions to ask yet, so you need the data science side to figure out can me as a human ask any meaningful questions here. So yeah, I think they're very much both important. And I'd just like to open it up to the panel to ask if you have any closing comments on this rivalry of a topic we chose for today. Sven?
Yeah, no, I don't see there any rivalry at all. In fact, I think they have to be great friends. They go hand in hand, to use the same analogy. But basically, fantastic panel. I really enjoyed it. And I actually if I can, just say thank you, Rishal, for emceeing and the rest of the panelists. Thank you for joining us all. And then also big thanks to Stefan and Rian in the background. Sorry, I've got magnificent thunder happening behind me. Hopefully it's not too loud. But Rian and Stefan have been exceptionally helpful in the last couple of weeks building up to this event. So thank you for their help, and thank you to the audience for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Sven. All right. Yeah, if anyone else from the panel wants to say anything, just raise your hand. But I don't know about, I know people need to drop off. This is the time that was allocated. I'm more than happy to stick around if anyone in the audience has questions. So maybe whoever wants to stick around, you can. But I'd just like to thank everyone on the panel. I think it was really insightful. It was a really meaningful conversation between us all, as well as the audience. There was some great interaction on those polls, some really good questions and insights from some of you. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to Rian and Stefan for arranging this whole thing. I think it's been great. Thanks.
It's been awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining.
Cool.
It definitely sounds like we have to do round 2.